Good evening, everyone. Well, how do you follow that? You can see that we've got two really great media companies that are represented here. Sarah is quite literally one of the best interviewers I've ever seen. This is my first ever interviewing assignment because this is supposed to be a chat with two car guys. I'm the co-founder of the race, and today we're very, very happy to probably be making the news. Because if you've been living under a rock, you would have not noticed that Cadillac are coming to Formula One, and they're launching this weekend on Saturday night. But we're very lucky to have the driving force behind the Cadillac Formula One team here in conversation with two car guys. So I'd like to bring up on stage the man behind that project, Dan Towriss. Dan, as I say, how do we follow that? I mean, I'm not going to throw you some hard questions that Sarah did just there. We're going to just have a chat. Is that okay?
Yeah, I don't have the statistics that he has there, but what an incredible job he's done here in the city of Miami.
I don't come from Miami, but I'll take your word for it. And what an incredible job you've got and what you've done, really, because I've been in motorsport for a long time. I grew up with it. I know how difficult motorsport is. I know how difficult Formula One is. Formula One is a closed shop. For those of you that are not Formula One fans, there's only 10 Formula One teams, and the last time a new Formula One team came on the grid was 10 years ago. And Dan won't be talking about this, but Formula One have tried really hard for it not to be 11 teams. So what made you decide that you thought it would be a good idea to have the 11th team, and how difficult has it been once you decided to actually make that dream come true?
I guess they told me no, so I decided to dig in.
Hopefully your answer is going to be a little bit longer than that, otherwise...
No, absolutely. So, Formula One is the pinnacle in motorsport. It's the biggest stage for innovation in motorsport, with Formula One being an engineering series. And the United States didn't have a team. America doesn't have a team operating, out of the United States in Formula One. And so there was a real opportunity to do that, and a partnership with General Motors through the Cadillac brand was an incredible opportunity to do that.
Well, I think, again, being a Brit, there's a lot of infrastructure in the UK. What do you see as the challenges as an American team coming in to try and break that dominance of this, what we call Motorsport Valley? I live in Motorsport Valley. Mercedes is only 10 minutes drive away from Aston Martin. It's only 5 minutes away from where the Haas team are. So what challenges do you see as a real true, and really the first true American team for a long, long time to come into Formula One, trying to be American-based and have this American infrastructure that you talk about?
Yeah, so when we talk about being an American-based Formula One team, we're talking about over 600,000 square feet of manufacturing and power unit facility under roof, in the United States. But as you mentioned, a lot of the talent for Formula One exists in the UK, exists in Europe, and so we're starting there with our base in Silverstone. We're working on, in Indianapolis, we're building our manufacturing headquarters, and then the power unit company is being built in the Charlotte area.
So that means then you've got facilities in the home of British motorsport?
Then in the home of IndyCar, and then the home of NASCAR.
That's a
so there's some motorsport DNA for you right there.
Well, and that's a pretty good segue, because you were telling me this weekend, not only are you launching, which is historic, this is why I'm making my debut as an interviewer, because I think it really is a historic moment in Formula One that you're launching a Formula One team, but you've also made huge investments, huge infrastructure plays in other motorsport areas. So you were telling us earlier that you've got racing going on elsewhere in the world as well.
Yeah, so we're racing in Monaco this weekend in Formula E. We're racing in Birmingham, Alabama at Barber Motorsport Park with IndyCar. And then we're racing at Texas Motor Speedway with NASCAR this weekend. So it's a big weekend for us. And then, of course, we think the next year we're going to be adding Formula One to that racing calendar as well. Do I need a helmet up here?
Well, the Formula One teams are really, really nervous about this guy coming in, and we just saw someone, I don't know who's in the trees.
Is Zach Brown back there?
Zach Brown's back there, I can see him. We're not going to tell any Zach stories tonight.
No.
Okay. That's definitely put me off my list. Now, we talk about the difficulty of American teams getting involved in Formula One. There's a rumor on the internet today that by the way, not by the race, because we're not a clickbait site, okay? So it's other news sources, if you call them that. that you're going to announce a driver on Saturday night? Because everyone's really interested about who you're going to announce. I know you're not going to tell us.
So I just
Or are you? Hang on. Is it exclusive?
Are you on the
No,
edge of
it's
your
not.
seat?
No. My question is, why do you think it's so difficult for American drivers to be successful in Formula One? The last time, and here's a little nerdy fact for everyone that you can take to the racetrack on the weekend, the last time that an American driver won the Formula One World Championship was a bloke called Mario Andretti, who I think you know a little bit about.
Yeah, we know our
and that was 47 years ago. So why is it so difficult for American racing drivers to break into Formula One when we've got some fantastic drivers in IndyCar, in NASCAR, everywhere else, but Formula One, it just doesn't seem to work since Mario, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree you have to look at how the karting system is in the United States. You know, it's a bit more organized in Europe and the UK. I think for a driver to really set their sights on Formula One as an American, they've got to, at a pretty young age, basically move to the UK to race in the Formula Series, starting through Formula 4. We've got Sebastian Weldon running this weekend, son of Dan Weldon, in our development program. And so I think for us, it's getting a development program in place to help Americans to really give them that vision to grow up through that Formula Series. But again, when you think about that, an American, a young kid has to go over to Europe for a number of years. And so by the time they spend all that time and earn their seat in Formula One, they have an American passport, but a lot of people here have never heard of them. And so we've got to find a way to change that dynamic so that these racers, these race car drivers, are being seen for their skill set in the United States, but they're developing the right skill sets. They're getting the super license points that they need. They're learning the circuits. They're learning the tires, that will, the information they'll need to have in Formula One. But we've got to make all that stuff happen, and then we've got to have a seat available for them on the biggest stage.
Well, it's funny, the Axios co-founder, Roy Schwartz, who's not here, unfortunately, he's in Spain because his son, who's 15, has had to move to Spain to race. So it's exactly as you're saying. The Americans that potentially could end up in Formula One are racing in Europe, and then they get forgotten by the home market, if you like. And knowing a little bit about American sport, you guys need a hometown hero, right? As well as having the Cadillac brand above the door, wouldn't it be great to have an American driver in that seat?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal is simply, American team, American power unit, and an American driver. But again, we want to do that the right way. It's not just, pluck an American racing in an existing series and say, here's your Formula One seat. That could be a very tough way to enter the sport. So we want to make sure that we do that the right way, and we've got a plan to get that done.
So now we need to find a fast but famous American racing driver. Okay, there's a challenge on there.
Yeah, I know a few.
One of the other challenges in the sport, which I think, having researched your background since this story came out that you were involved in the Cadillac Formula One team, is female participation in the sport in general. There's been some strides been made in recent years. If you're going to the track at the weekend, you'll see a championship called F1 Academy. That's for all female drivers, but we haven't seen a female driver on the grid for many, many years. I know through Gamebridge you do some excellent work in other female sports. You were saying earlier you spend nearly 50% of your sponsorship budget on female initiatives in sport. What do you see as the issue with why we haven't got more females in the sport, and what do you think that with that insight you've got from other areas of your business that you can bring to change that?
Well, again, I think a lot of what's behind us investing, in women's sports is really about just creating that opportunity. I think we believe, whether it's at Gamebridge or in our financial services business, whether it's TWG Motorsports, that everyone should have an opportunity to thrive. And so that's whether as a driver or that's in other sports, or in women's golf, women's tennis, women's basketball, and now women's soccer. We announced the Gamebridge Super League last week in New York. And so now when we turn to motorsports, I think it's how do we get young girls interested in karting so that they're coming in at a young age, developing the skill sets that are necessary, the mentality that's necessary to compete on that level. We love the work that the F1 Academy is doing, but it's not enough. And we don't just want to see female drivers in the sport. We want executives. We want engineers, mechanics, all across the board. There should be an opportunity, because again, it's that diversity of thought, that diversity of background is what really is going to make the fabric of motorsports all that much better.
I think I'll blow your trumpet for you. Yes. Big cheer for that one. I think we could almost have a panel on that. But I'll blow your trumpet for you. I've met two of your executives this evening who are both female. So maybe you just want to touch on that, the fact that you're already making that change in the sport.
Yeah, and I think from our standpoint, a lot of times it's you first have to create an opportunity or an environment at your company where women have a real opportunity and they feel comfortable and can thrive. And so we've been so fortunate. Jill Gregory is our Chief Operating Officer. She came over from NASCAR, where she was the former CMO. She was president of the Sonoma Raceway. And so we have someone who's a real badass in motorsports, who's working on our team, helping us creating opportunities, and really starts to set the stage and make a pathway for other females into the sport.
I'd imagine a lot of people here have come in through the sport. We were talking earlier, and again, we haven't got time to talk about how you got into the sport. We definitely need another one of these panels. But you were a latecomer to it. I was almost born into the sport. But a lot of people here, certainly in America, the impact that Drive to Survive has had on the explosion of interest in America is huge. Obviously, we've seen that. You run teams in NASCAR and IndyCar and everything else. What real impact has Drive to Survive had? Is it as big as we all think? The Drive to Survive effect, is it real?
Oh, it's absolutely real. It's brought a whole new, generations of fans into motorsport. It also helped the Max and Lewis battle, at that same time, being able to tell that story through the eyes of Drive to Survive. It brought a lot of new fans, into motorsport. And then, but you still have to look at the job that Formula One has done. The events that they're creating, they're spectacular. The Miami F1 Grand Prix, the 3 events that we have in the United States, F1 events, all over the globe are just absolutely spectacular. And so commercially, it's just driving so much value. We heard over $500 million of economic impact from one race from this weekend, here in the Miami area. And so I think that says a lot about where Formula One, is at. And so I think in motorsports, it's becoming more mainstream in the United States. I think a rising tide will lift all boats there. We're seeing, increased interest in NASCAR and IndyCar and other motorsports as well. Sports cars are way up. Look at the Rolex 24, the last few years, and everything just continues to grow up, to go upwards in that standpoint. And so that's why we want to be in every major motorsport, across the globe.
That was almost a great place to finish, but we're not allowed to finish at that point. I think what was interesting, I'll pick out of that, I'm going to try and copy a little bit what Sarah did, which was to summarize only the last part, which is everyone talks about the Drive to Survive effect, but you've just highlighted the fact that Liberty have made a massive amount of changes, not just that one thing. And they've said, which I think is a great phrase, there's 24 Super Bowls every year. So you go to Silverstone, it's now a massive festival. It used to be a race in the middle of an old World War II bomber field. Not quite, but these events now are festivals. They're big events. They're not just a race that happens and then everyone disappears. So I think the Drive to Survive effect is impactful, but I think Liberty have done an amazing job. And before COVID, we had one Grand Prix that was sort of doing okay in the US, and now we've got 3 massive Grand Prix that stand alone. We just heard from the mayor how much of an impact that's had. So I think it's, as you say, it's growing. It's great to have Cadillac. I can't think of a better American name that we can have on the grid, so thank you for bringing that. Apparently Axios have got there's one more thing or one big thing, but apparently I've got to ask a fun thing. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. By the way, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Drive to Survive. So I'm going to watch that series, because now I know you, I'm going to watch that. You and Zach having a fight.
Yeah.
So who's going to win at the weekend? Who's going to win? Who's going to win the race at the weekend? You haven't got a car there yet, so you can't say yours. So who's going to win?
You know what? I'm going to go with Max. I think he's going to. McLaren's have been fast. McLaren, both Oscar and Lando have been super fast. They certainly have been the team to beat this year. But this is a good track for Max, and I think he's going to surprise.
Brilliant. What a great answer. Thank you very much. I'm sure everybody here.
Right. Thank you.
Even the people with the Ferrari tops on are going to be Cadillac fans next year.
Lewis Hamilton.
You guys really were here for the first big interview around this amazing project. So I think everyone in the room will wish you great luck, and we look forward to seeing how you get on next year.
Great. Thanks, Darren.
Cheers, Dan.
All right.